Alright, I'm Andrew. I'm an alcoholic. I've never told my story before, so just bear with me. I made some notes in case I get off track. So I'm 27. I'm a mail carrier. I live in Hampstead, New Hampshire right now. My story is not too crazy, especially compared to some of you guys, but it's a story and I am an alcoholic. So most of my childhood was pretty okay. I grew up in Windham, New Hampshire, for a lot of it. Kind of a well-to-do town that we could barely afford to live in, but had a good school district, so that's why we moved there in 2004. I got along okay with a lot of the kids in my school. It wasn't a huge community or anything, and there wasn't a ton of jerks, but it was kind of hard for me to fit in a lot. I had kind of a small group of friends. So when I was really young, I didn't have really too many passions. I read, I played with Legos, I did drawings and doodles and stuff, and I was pretty smart, pretty good in school, and I really applied myself right up until 6th or 7th grade. I guess my first real addiction was video games, because that's when I got my first video game, and it didn't take long for that to just sort of take over everything else. Schoolwork, didn't care, reading, didn't care, just playing games whenever I could. So that pretty much continued all through high school, and my group of friends stayed relatively small, changed a little bit from middle school to high school, but the guys I was with were pretty alright. When I graduated high school, though, I don't know what exactly happened. I know I have, something to do with, not really staying in touch with them, but they pretty much all stopped talking to me after I graduated high school. So I had maybe one or two friends, and one of them was away to school in Arizona, so I was pretty much by myself. Because of the kind of town that it was, they really pushed kids to go to college and stuff, and I barely even graduated high school. I could have easily gotten straight A's if I really wanted to, but in a class of 220, I was ranked 190 something. So I just figured, I don't know, maybe I like cars, I'll go to a trade school, learn how to work on cars. So I did that for a couple months. I hated it. I wasn't really getting the support that I needed. So I dropped out of that, and I started working fast food. I worked for Dunkin' Donuts for 5 years, from the age of 18. And at that age, 18, that was really the first time that I drank alcohol and got drunk. I had a buddy that I was driving with, and he was just we've got some beers up at our camp trailer. You want to go drink some? And I was like, okay. And that was the first time, and I got really drunk, and it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. So given that, within a week of doing that, I went back up to that trailer without him, and I took as much alcohol out of there that I could and brought it home with me. So that was my first really shameful act. I eventually came clean to him about it later, but anyways, I continued working at Dunkin' Donuts for a while. I really did not like that job. I worked at one at the mall, then I moved to one in my hometown, and that buddy that was in Arizona ended up moving back home, and we started hanging out a little bit. At the time, I didn't really drink very much, just every now and then I'd steal stuff from my parents at home. Pretty much, he introduced me to some people in his circle that I knew from high school but weren't really my friends, and they were all starting to come out of college at this time, 21, 22 years old, so I think they were still kind of in party mode, and I never really got that experience. So whenever I'd hang out with them, we'd drink, we'd get drunk. It was a good time, hanging out at campfires and stuff like that. And it was about the time I reconnected with another kid from school, and we started smoking some weed together. I was 18 the first time, and throughout my 20s, I had a lot of coworkers at Dunkin' Donuts that did drugs, so I'd hang out with them. We'd smoke on the clock. We'd smoke after work. Really got a taste for that, but eventually my dad found out, and that really set him off. So I was pretty much able to shut that down. Also, when I was 17, I had a surgery, and they sent me home with like some codeine because it was pretty painful, and I like immediately got hooked on that, and it didn't go for very long, but I turned into like a medicine cabinet rummager, so anytime I could get my hands on the stuff I did. But again, eventually my mom found out, and they shut that down, and that was the end of that. I haven't touched opiates since because I know how addictive they are, and I really liked it, so never again with that stuff. Let's see. So, about 21 years old, I gathered up the courage to quit my job at Dunkin' Donuts. I just sort of applied to some jobs on Indeed, and the post office just happened to be the first one that called me back. And this is about the same time, I turned 21, so I could buy as much alcohol as I wanted. And pretty much straight away, I was bringing home like 30 racks and just drinking as much as I wanted. Like, I wasn't getting totally shit-faced all the time, but it didn't take long for my parents to start expressing their concerns. I was really only doing it at home. Sometimes I'd go out with bars with some of my friends. But, over time, it became more and more and more. I'd black out every now and then. Told myself I'd never drink and drive. I avoided that for a long time, but that ended up being one of the lines I crossed, along with a lot of others, like things where I never thought it would get to that point. I didn't really consider myself a full alcoholic in my early 20s. I was in denial for years. Eventually, I started fucking around with like the hard stuff, drinking hard liquor, and my dad was like totally against that. So I started hiding things. I was holding myself up in my room all the time, drinking by myself, just pretty much every day. I'd come home from work, I'd try to race home as early as possible to get there before everyone else so I can just sneak stuff in and hope that they wouldn't notice. But, they notice when I show up for dinner at 6 p.m. I've been home for like 3 or 4 hours and I'm already shit-faced. So over time, this started to really affect my job performance. Again, I told myself, like, I'll just always work if I have a hangover and I'll never call out. And I started calling out more and more, showing up late for work. Initially, they were kind of fine with it, but over time, they, started saying stuff. So I was in like my mid-20s at this point, and I just started becoming like really miserable, and like almost every day I would drink until I blacked out, wake up with a hangover the next day, somehow get my job done. Repeating process. I'm that guy that shows up to parties with my friends. I'm already drunk when I get there. They don't want to let me drive home because I've had too many, so I end up sleeping on the floor, yada yada yada. So I'm starting to feel like I'm a bit of a pariah at this point. Like, people at work are starting to take notice. And, it was probably around 24, 25. I was ready to admit, like, okay, I might have a problem, but I had no idea what to do about it. I was pretty sick of drinking at this point. It just wasn't fun anymore. So I kind of had the bright idea, like, I'll just go back to, like, weed only, and we'll see how that goes. That didn't last for more than a week, but I started getting really heavy into that. I could just drive down to the dispensary, buy edibles, whatever. That's pretty concealable. I don't have to leave my room to do those. So I got really heavy into those, and it just kept on going on and on and on. Every now and then I'd have like close calls when I was driving. Thank God, I was lucky enough to never have an accident or get a DUI or anything like that. But I was pretty fearful that eventually work was going to get fed up with me and I'd lose my job. So around the beginning of last year, I decided, my parents had just had absolutely enough of this. They weren't going to throw me out, but pretty much every day they were getting pissed off at me. They were, like, why are you doing this to yourself? When are you going to make a change? When are you going to do something about it? And I had no idea what I was going to do about it, but I figured, I'm already almost 26, and like pretty much all my friends have already moved out of their parents' house. It's probably time for me, and I had enough money I could afford to do it. I couldn't buy a house, but I could rent. So I started looking for a while, kind of off and on, and eventually in October I found something, moved from Wyndham to Hampstead, and I just took off from there. Like, I was completely unrestricted. Very quickly things got completely out of control. I was probably drinking, like one of these size bottles of liquor a day, just like 6 to 12 beers a day. I was eating like those like edible gummies. I'd start with 2 and end up eating like 20 by the end of the night. I started smoking again, smoking weed, not cigarettes. And by probably November, December, that's around the time things get really busy at the post office. I was like on the verge of like a fucking mental breakdown. Like, I was starting to have just suicidal thoughts. I was thinking about how I would do it. Thank God I never actually attempted it, but I threatened to do it once or twice on a couple of really bad nights. And I spent a week with a friend of mine while he was staying with me that kind of drives me nuts, and that was like my breaking point. A couple of things happened while he was visiting, and after I left, I don't know what came over me, but I was just like, this is it. I just like shut off my phone. I didn't tell anybody anything. I locked all the doors in my house. I gathered up like as much beer and vodka and stuff as I could, and I just holed myself up in my house for 2 days with like music blasting, and was like non-stop 24/7, drinking until I black out, waking, drinking until I black out. And work didn't know where I was. I wasn't planning on coming back. So they call the police first to do like a well-being check on me. So I come to the door and he's like, "Is everything all right?" I'm like, "Yep, go away. Everything's all right." The next day I hear like banging on the door. I can't get up, and eventually I hear like the knob twisting. So like my dad came to come check on me, and got the landlord's husband to let him in, and that really scared the shit out of him. So it was a few days before Christmas at this point, and I called work. I said I was going to come back. I can't believe they didn't fire me because of that. But from there till like the new year, I stayed with my parents. We had a lot of pretty serious talks. And I finally agreed, okay, I'll try therapy. I'm like, that's the ticket. So like January, around that time, we made some calls. I got like a licensed drug and alcohol counselor. Started meeting with her, put me on naltrexone, put me on Cymbalta. I was meeting with her about once a week. It was going good for a little while. I was still drinking on the naltrexone, and getting high every day. And that really wasn't working. And this went on for a couple more months until, sometime in April. Again, I had just reached a total breaking point. I had called out like several days in a week, and I went on this one last trip to New York the weekend before I went to rehab. When I came back, I stayed up all night drinking, couldn't go to work the next day. It's like a Monday. And I didn't know what to do. I was like, this is it. I'm not going to show up for work today. So I called work and I was like, I'm not coming in today. I'm going to my parents' house and I think I'm going to rehab. And that was it. So that's what I did. I went back to my parents. I told them that's what I was thinking of doing. It seemed a little drastic to me, but I didn't know what else to do. And I talked about it a couple times with my therapist, but never really seriously considered it. But I called her, she got in touch with me, and she recommended this place. She was like, it's a great place, it's a great program. When you first start, you'll go to detox at Liberty Bay for a week, and then they'll send you up there. It's outdoorsy, great views, great people, you'll love it. I'm like, okay, whatever. I had no idea what to expect. I've never done rehab or anything like that. So I'm really glad that I made the choice to do this, because initially I was very pensive. I didn't know what to expect. I had all these ideas from like shows and movies and stuff of like people in rehab, and I wasn't being like judgmental or anything like that, but I didn't feel like I was going to fit in, you know? I was thinking like, I'm not a drug addict, like I don't think my problem's really serious enough that, you know, people aren't going to accept me here, and couldn't have been more wrong. Right away, all the people were super nice at Liberty Bay. I started learning a lot really quickly. Coming here, everybody was very warm. I didn't make a ton of friends right away, but, you know, people were generally very nice. Like, I imagine when I go on the outside and I tell people about all the people I've met, they're not going to believe that just a big group of drug addicts and alcoholics could be so awesome. But you are, and I'm really grateful for that. Again, I don't mean to be detrimental. I'm just saying, like, people get ideas in their head. There's stereotypes, and I've been a victim of the stereotype too. So when you come in, they ask you, like, what are your goals for rehab? And, you know, I was really depressed, and I didn't really know what exactly to say. So I thought about it for a bit, and I'm like, well, I really don't like where I'm at right now, and I really have no purpose in life. So I guess just, you know, feeling better about myself and having a purpose in life. And I feel like this program has really done that for me. And I'm going to leave in a couple of days. I've got plans in place. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing my family and stuff. But more than that, you know, working the program of AA and having, you know, things I want to do. Starting to get more and more spiritual. It's not like a theological spirituality, but, you know, what I make of it, and just trying to do what seems right, the next right thing, helping other people. You know, I'll probably speak more at AA meetings when I get out of here, and I'm looking forward to that. So that's a purpose. You know, I want to go back to work, be a better employee, show up on time every day. Sure that'll thrill my boss to death, and just overall having hope for the future. I'm confident that from here on out I can stay sober, but, you know, not cautiously confident, you know. Yeah, I'm just really grateful for this experience, and I'm glad that I was able to get all this out and talk to all you guys. That's pretty much it. Thank you.